Hello everyone and welcome to Pablo Escobar's video series. This is going to be vlog entry number 8 in my series as I continue my traversing through season 25's Rhodium tier. So as we're entering this final week, around 4, I realized that my 1 SLKR is starting to come a little bit under pressure, kind of like Mando from season 1.
We have you 4-1.
I like those odds.
And yeah, pretty much just like Mando in that Mudhorn fight, that's pretty much how it ended. On my back, struggling and very messy, but we still sort of managed to luck out a win in some of these rounds. So let's go through it. The first round we came up against a player named Panacotta, who was sort of like a dessert in a way, I guess. It was quite a meal that we were able to make out of this, and we were able to come across with our second full clear for the season. So we started out our first round against the Geos with our Sith Triumvirate and came out with 65 banners. Our second matchup, we decided to try and tackle this Kylo Ren on Mars team. And so far we've had quite a bit of success with using the Bounty Hunter team, mainly just to be able to pull off the disintegrate from Mando once we can trigger the contract. Aura Singh's very rapid contract fire really helps out with this, but unfortunately here we'd lost Mando initially, but we were able to still salvage that Bounty Hunter's discipline, or whatever it's called, and come back and pull off the disintegrate on Kylo Ren on Mast. Kind of hopped around a little bit here, intent on taking out Hux so that he didn't pass around extra turn meter, but in the end came away with 61 banners, even though Aura Singh died off. With a bit of gear, maybe that team will be a bit more consistent with a bit of higher banner recovery. We then went up against this Old Republic team with the Cartanassi lead, and this was just frustrating because it wasn't the typical Old Republic configuration that we usually go up against. So here we had just Zalbar and Cart and then 3 Jedi, and there's no Canderous Ordor with the damage over times that will help with triggering it. But more frustratingly, we have this Jolee who we have to somehow try and obliterate before he keeps reviving people. And interspersed with that, we've got Juhani with a stun and Bastila with a ability block on her basic. And if Kylo is unable to get that second special of his off, he really has no sustain. And it came pretty close to looking like he was going to die a few times, and also was a bit concerned about a possible timeout once we had to focus in on Jolee. But anyway, we then went up against General Grievous, taking my Jedi Knight Revan team against him. And while this should be a pretty standard counter, it's been a little bit tricky lately, I think because I'm trying to punch up a bit too high with some very under-relict members on this team. I mean, Bastila, Jolee, and Hermit Yoda are still all at gear 12, so it is a little bit of a stretch, I think, to try and punch up too high, but we tried and unfortunately failed with this Jedi Knight Revan team, despite bringing everyone back. I think the problem comes in when Jolee dies, or in this case, he's the last man standing, and it's too many turns to go to his revive. But anyway, we thought, you know what, we'll circle back to them later. Let's just try now something different, try a Infus Nest solo against Mon Mothma. I think my thinking was that, you know, since it's a lot of teams attacking out of turn, etc., Nest would be able to get off a lot of counters and be able to pile up some damage. But I think my Nest is too undergeared to pull this off. I have looked at the idea of trying to work on Wampa for the next round of Grand Arena, so I'm still busy trying to gear him up. And he's probably going to get the next Omicron, but that should seem to be a more consistent counter against these teams that rely on mass assist and mass swarm kind of attack strategies. And unfortunately Infus Nest was not the key to unlocking that team. So we then decided, you know what, let's just bring in our trusty Empire team. Unfortunately Short Trooper bit the dust from this turn meter train that they had going on, but once Vader was freed from that harness, he was able to bring the turn meter train back into our favor, and we were able to pull out a win, although not as pretty as we've gotten used to with this Empire team. Maybe if they had gone first, I might have actually been able to secure a more comfortable win. But anyway, came away from the Mon Mothma battle with 37 banners. We then went up against Jedi Master Kenobi, and I think the important thing here was that this was the Jedi Master Kenobi team that had Commander Ahsoka Tano but did not have an ultimate. So I deliberated a bit, should I really go in for this team, should I not go in? I wasn't really sure what I was going to do here. So my thinking was to try and use my Padme team against this Jedi Master Kenobi, at least try and take out Kat, and then come back later with my General Anakin Skywalker to clear it up. At this point I was thinking that I'm probably not going to get a full clear, and Commander Tano went straight in and took out my Jedi Knight Anakin, and I was thinking, oh gosh, there it is, it's going to be a very difficult uphill battle. But the game, or the match rather, was not over until either the entire team is dead or we timed out. So we said, you know what, let's just give this our best shot. The irritating thing about this is General Kenobi and the opposite team sharing foresight, so I kind of had to hold this loaded force leap until I could get a clear opening, and that took a little bit of time to get to, but fortunately my Jedi General Kenobi at Relic 7 was able to hold up to quite a lot of punishment until we could spot our ideal opening. And once General Kenobi was out, we could then focus in and take out our prize target, which was the opposing Commander Tano. And there we go. When she was down, then this match started looking a little bit more favorable. And we started like getting a little bit cocky and thinking, you know what, if we were able to do this well so far, why don't we just go full in and try and see if we can one-hit this Jedi Master Kenobi. And before this match I definitely would have not thought of that as being a possibility, but coming away with 57 banners using my Padme Cat team was definitely impressive. I think also the point from that was that it was a Jedi Master Kenobi who did not have the high ground, and as we know, without that, what is a Kenobi? But in any case, we then decided that since we didn't need gas and the back wall was not looking particularly threatening, let's just go and take out this General Grievous team. So set them to work, and I mean, Grievous is just a nasty team to verse in most cases, but yeah, it's just irritating, I think. But we were able to clear out, get some work going, and we were able to eventually put Grievous in the ground for 38 banners. Then looked at the fleets and decided let's pick up some fleet wins first before we circle back around to their bottom teams, just to see how this went. So we started off by going up against their Malevolence and using my Negotiator, and this was a pretty straightforward battle. I think the priority was to try and hold off with the Mass Assist until we could get a clear shot on the spy, which we were able to put away, and then it was pretty much a matter of picking off the remaining units. With the spy gone, it seemed like less of a worry because the spy would call the Mass Assist, etc. Then it was just about trying to race the clock before the Malevolence pulls off its ultimate. We then went up against a Rebel fleet, and I got my first shot at using the Finalizer in a Grand Arena setup with the TIE Echelon. And it did not disappoint, actually. Like, this ship is surprisingly hardy. It held up really well. It took a lot of punishment. The biggest worry, though, was this Rebel Y-Wing, which blocked its protection recovery. But once we were able to shrug that off, I think we were able to pull around. So with this team, I'm still working on getting the Special Forces TIE ship up and running at a reasonably competitive star level. So it's still not dishing out a lot of damage, but I think the strategy so far is to try and get the Echelon to take the hits, the Command Shuttle to pass around the turn meter so that it can keep its protection up, while the TIE Silencer keeps advantage and continuously pummels the enemies from behind that line. I also try to keep my TIE bomber for my Finalizer fleet because I feel like I'm missing a ship, and this TIE bomber works quite nicely with the fact that it's got a mass buff cleanse. So since we were able to clear the fleets in one hit each, we decided let's circle around and look at this bottom wall. We then went up against this Qui-Gon Jinn team with our Imperial Troopers, the trusty Imperial Troopers. So this was our first run in against a Mace Windu since the rework. Not that it really posed much of a problem. I think the only major problem here was probably that Aayla Secura pulling off one counter attack, but it was against the Dark Trooper and just knocked off one stack, so didn't do too much. So we came away with 65 banners. But I think inspired by the Qui-Gon Jinn team and the Mace Windu on that team, I decided, you know what, let's try our own Mace Windu in a Shakti composition of our leftover Galactic Republic units. So we tried this out, and they were eventually able to cut their way through this. It's only in retrospect, just actually today, at the time of the recording of this video, when I was sitting and adjusting mods and just sorting out things in my roster, that I realized my Mace Windu still had all of his skills at tier 1. Sometime earlier when they'd done the rework, they'd refunded all of his ability mats, and I'd never gotten around to replacing them, and I kind of just assumed that he was still at the same level. So I've just been using this significantly underwhelming, undergeared Mace Windu. I mean, he's geared up to gear 11 because I was using the Endurance as my main capital ship for a while until I unlocked the Negotiator. But even with the fact that all of his abilities are at tier 1, he's still able to actually perform some reasonable functions. I mean, his kit is definitely far more versatile, much more utility now than it previously had. For the most part, I kind of just bulked out the damage dealing to Ela Sakura, mainly for the stun lock and for just getting off like some decent critical hits. But I think after reading through Mace Windu's kit and how his damage works, I'm going to try and see. I think I stacked him up with a lot of health mods to make him 1, tanky, and 2, to be able to dish out a lot more attack damage off of his basic, I think it is. So we'll see how that works out in the next season of Grand Arena, if I can find a team to put him into. Then with this Ewok team, I decided to go up with a Count Dooku counter against them. So at this point I was thinking, you know what, like I'm using Count Dooku, Asajj, and the Droideka. I've got 3 Separatists that are pretty much just lying around, not really doing much. And Bastila kind of fits in just as a Sith, I guess, but she doesn't really have much synergy with this team. But I suppose she worked well enough to try and limit the amount of out-of-turn attacks. Anyway, came out from round 1 with a score of 1474 against 501. We then went into round 2 and I decided to try and use the Imperial Troopers, and this was a terrible mistake against Jedi Master Luke. Even though he didn't have his ultimate, I underestimated the fact that his initial opening move with the ability block completely neutralizes the Imperial Troopers. It was a costly mistake. And maybe if I just used gas off the get-go, I would have probably had a possible counter against CLS. It's not guaranteed because on with the shoot first would just take out someone and might actually upend the entire progression anyway. But now we'll never really know, I guess. But anyway, we decided let's just take gas in. I think I'd had one squad arena battle against a Jedi Master Luke who had no ultimate, and gas was able to comfortably win that. But I thought I was going to be able to try and save gas and use him instead for the CLS team. But yeah, unfortunately difficult decisions, and maybe not the best decision, but we came away with 40 banners from that win. We then went up against their gas team and I used my Padme team. Given that there was only one real relic on this team, I think it was gas and maybe fires, but he wasn't really highly relicked. This should have been a little bit more straightforward, but this gas on defense actually is quite annoying because of the counter attacks. I mean, there's 3 people on this team that can counter attack. So yeah, I mean, we came away with a win, and once gas drops to the Commander Tano for sleep, the rest of this team is kind of undone quite quickly. So yeah, quite a decent counter to this team. So 60 banners and decent win there. Then we had to stare down this CLS team, and CLS just continues to be the bane of my existence in Grand Arena. He's still the team that I'm seeming to struggle with quite a lot. So I thought, since they attack quite out of turn quite often, might be a good idea to try Traya lead. Unfortunately, my Traya is not exactly that well geared, and neither was the rest of that team. They just got blitzed on very quickly by the turn meter train. I mean, maybe there was a chance that we could have killed off 1 or 2, at least 3 Pak, maybe Chipio, or maybe Chewie at least. I don't know, maybe Darth Talon might be of some benefit. I think she's able to boost the survivability of that team. But regardless, we don't really have anything to counter it at the moment. I think Darth Revan and Sith Eternal Emperor are viable counters, both of which I unfortunately do not have. So something to work towards, I think, since CLS seems to stonewall me quite a bit. I then decided to try my bounty hunters against this Ido Inverso team, and got a taste of what my opponents probably feel when they go up against mine and fail. On paper it looks like quite an easy team and should be easy to take out, but unfortunately that was not the case. We then took our Dooku team that we had used in the previous round and decided to use it against these bounty hunters, and they were able to get quite a decent amount of work in. I think we were able to work slowly and methodically through this. Probably with a little bit more synergy, a bit of better cohesion, etc., we might have been able to do a bit more. But I mean, Basilar Fallen is what, like gear 7 or something. Other than getting off 1 or 2 fears every now and then, she doesn't particularly add too much to the team. So we decided, you know what, let's just try and see what we can take out. So we were able to get rid of Boba there at least. Django unfortunately got the damage immunity from the contract being triggered, and that proved to be a bit of a complication. So we tried to make some work here. I mean, I don't know where else I'm supposed to use this Veton until I can get a resistance team of some sort going, and even then he might not be the best possible hero to use. So he's just kind of an extra that I slot in whenever I need someone. Surprisingly, this Droideka actually held up for quite a while and was able to do a fair amount of work. The problem is though, he got stuck behind this Bosk taunt and just dished out all of his damage on a completely useless target. So yeah, that Dooku team unfortunately failed. We then decided, you know what, let's just try with a Shakti led team and let's see how this goes. So again, Mace Windu, to my chagrin, was not geared up, and something I could have detected, but honestly, would it have made a difference? It's a matter of debate, I guess. The problem is this Bosk lead just keeps regenerating protection, and it's such a nuisance. The nice thing about this team though is that there are 2 buff dispels, with Shakti's basic and Mace Windu being able to dispel buffs on the enemy as well, so at least we could work around the taunt whenever it came up. And Shakti is reasonably fast, so she gets quite a few turns and is able to keep the taunt off Bosk for quite a reasonable amount of time. Unfortunately, Mace's damage output is not that great, and this entire team pretty much leveraged on Ayla Secura being able to dish out the damage with translation, trying to see if we could boost more calls to get her to attack more often. Maybe this team might show more promise now that Mace Windu has a bit more gear under his name, but we shall see. I'm not too optimistic. I think if I have a surplus of Zetas at some point, I'll probably put a Zeta onto Barriss and then start looking at Mace Windu's Zetas more seriously. But ultimately this team just didn't have any real measurable damage output, I think, and maybe that was the weakness in this team. We basically got stalemated then and could not break through this Bosk protection recovery, and unfortunately ended up heading towards a timeout. So this was a pretty irritating battle to get locked into. It's like neither of us could die and neither of us could kill the other one with any real certainty. Mace died, I guess, because I just wasn't paying attention to his healing, etc. But Barriss helps to keep this team alive quite nicely. I think with the Zeta should be able to help with more health recovery and make this team a bit more durable for a cleanup crew. But then we decided, you know what, if we're going to take this team out, we might as well try our faithful Kylo with a mask, since we have no one else we're really going to use him against. So we tried with the second special, but every time he takes out some protection, Boss just recovers it from inflicting debuffs or whatever his leadership does. So I decided, you know what, let's just try and get our counter attacks going, since the counter on Kylo with the mask ends up leading to a healing immunity. If we could land a few of those hits, then we noticed we were able to start chipping down Bosk's protection more readily because he doesn't regenerate so quickly. So we thought, you know, this is going to be our key to victory, but it was a key locked behind an annoying, thick-walled reptilian that was just a menace. Eventually we were able to put Bosk in the ground, and once he was out of the way, Dengar, despite hiding in stealth, was relatively easy to take out, and we came away with 36 banners. I don't know, I feel that Jedi team did their job in being able to at least get Django out of the way. That made the follow-up battles a bit easier with Kylo Ren. Then decided to try Nest against this Iden Verso team, and for a while it looked like we were going quite well, until Iden Verso pulls off one of her skills here, and the protection drops, and Nest is just open to be slaughtered by, I think it was Stark there. So apparently this is a team that Wampa can also counter again. But fortunately we were able to get our 149 banners and Braz Zinto didn't attack, so we came out with a win in round 2. Round 3 we went up against Maester Rhoda, and the first battle we opened up with was Gas versus the Bad Batch. So the OG Clone Wars heroes versus the newer kids on the block. Came away with 64 banners plus the extra 10 for the first battle. And started off with a good run. We decided, you know what, since we are versing a guy who's got 4 GLs against my 1 GL, we're going to try and be as tidy as we can, try and pick up as many banners as we can along the way, try not to drop too many banners or any battles if we could. And we started out, 64 banners is not too bad in the beginning, then 64 banners here again with the Empire team against this Rolo team. Then decided to take my Imperial Troopers against the opposing Bounty Hunter team with Fennec. I wasn't too sure how this team would handle, so I didn't want to take a chance, and in view of trying to be as quick and tidy as we could, decided to use the Bounty Hunters for this team. But they were able to make short work of them and came away with a nice 65 banners. We then went up against another Bounty Hunter team which had Bosk as the lead. This one was a little bit dicey though, because I figured if this team is a bit more relic stacked than the previous one, and they have two potential insta kills here, so we decided to take Jedi Knight Revan in. I think my one problem with this battle was that I didn't watch Boba Fett's turn meter very well. Maybe if I had, I probably could have avoided this execute that comes up just now. Yeah, there we go. And being able to come away with a little bit extra banners. But in the end, sorry for this lagging, my Twitch kind of went a bit on the fritz here. But in the end we were able to come off with a total of 61 banners. And not too bad, we were continuing on a pretty decent path here. 64, 64, 65, 61. Considering we were seriously outclassed by a much more superior roster, I felt this was really not that bad. We were doing quite well, I thought, to this point. A Mon Mothma crew, and in view of the fact that this is an attacking out of turn team and we know the Nest is not able to counter them adequately, I decided, you know what, let's just try the Sith Triumvirate. Since we would expose the back wall and seen that there were no Geos that we were likely going to come up against, we would rather use them here, and they actually did a fairly decent job, I guess. They were able to take out the opposing team without sustaining too much damage, and we were able to come away from this battle with 64 banners as well. Just a bit of loss of protection here and there, I guess. We then went up against a little bit more of a typical Old Republic team. This one is just complicated a little bit by the droid. So as we learned from previous experiences, the droid, I think it's C3M4, is able to land an ability block, and that kind of just halts our path to victory a little bit. So whenever Zalba's taunt was able to drop, we would try and land a hit until we were able to get Zalba out and then focus and take the droid out. And with no ability blocks, we could recover our health and protection and continue our rampage. So missions out of the picture, and then just take out the Candyman. 69 banners, pretty good. Full maximum banners there, that was achievable. We then went up against the Shakti led clones. This is actually interesting because this used to be the staple team I used to look for in Squad Arena when I had my Padme team as my only relic team about beginning of last year sometime. So it was actually nice to see how much faster it was able to be taken out once Cat is added to this team. Definitely supercharges this team far more than Grandmaster Yoda did. Then with this Director Krennic led Imperial team, decided to try something new. Since we had a few leftover Seppis, I decided, you know what, let's just throw Django in there. After all, he is a separatist for whatever limited affiliation he had with them in Attack of the Clones. But when Dooku uses his Master Makashi and brings everyone under stealth, Django also goes under stealth as well, and is able to sit in the stealth and pick out targets, evading taunt because of the Bounty Hunter's discipline thing that he's got. Meanwhile, Nest is left exposed, and if she's able to pull off consistent counters, she actually acts like a fairly decent tank until her chink in her armor comes up with a low protection, where the protection drops just after a turn. But it's something to look at and think about in the upcoming battles. We then decided, let's give fleets a try here, and I took my finalizer up against this negotiator. Spoiler alert, this didn't pan out too well. We unfortunately lost here. We were able to get the hunted off on Anakin's ship, which is usually what I like to do first to the finalizer, because it prevents him getting so many attacks out of turn and landing such a high amount of damage output. Unfortunately, it does nothing for when he attacks during his turn, and that's ultimately what picked us apart here. The Undying Loyalty that he starts off with makes him a little bit tricky to try and pin down, but I think it's also because my finalizer is only at like 6 stars at the moment against a 7-star negotiator, so we've got a bit more reinforcements, and the echelon's only at 5 stars as well against a fully 7-star highly relict team. So maybe with a little bit more stars in the echelon and it leveling up a bit more, etc., being able to unlock its second or its final tiers of its abilities, etc., and being a bit more tanky, it might hold up a bit better. But I think I need a bit more practice of a finalizer up against the negotiator. Then decided to take my negotiator up against this team here. In retrospect, maybe if I'd brought the finalizer against this team, I might have done a little bit better, but I wasn't too certain how my chances would be with a negotiator versus negotiator. On the other hand, the negotiators, I think it's the second or third special, the third special, which grants unending loyalty, also has a mass attack with a daze that's on everyone. That kind of stifles the finalizer's entire game mode of passing around turn meter and turn manipulation. But anyway, that was round 3, and unfortunately we lost 1004 to 1526. So when we look at the overall for season 25, somehow though, despite the messy battles, etc., like Mando against the Mudhorn, we were able to pull through from Erodium 3 to KYBER 4. Our skill rating improved from 2760 to 3019, an increase of about 259. We got a median score of about 926, considering our range was so high. I decided to quote that stat. 2 full clears this season, so quite less than last, but we are coming up against harder and harder opponents, so just see how that goes. In terms of our defensive champions, the Ewoks are still holding the title, having held 8 defensive wins since the beginning of the year. SLKR and that First Order team is holding 7, but Iden Verso storming up the back here has been able to pick up 4 defensive wins this season, which is the first time I think I've been using her consistently. Phasma is still tied with her at about 4, but we'll see in season 26 if Iden Verso is able to pip the Ewoks out of their spot. I've got some pretty decent hopes for that Iden Verso team. For those of you who've been watching the previous videos, you'll also see that she is part of my farming schedule. So with that farming path, she'll be gaining a little bit more gear, and with farming the Vulture Droid, a little bit more stars as well. So that should make this team start bulking up a little bit more and make them a little bit harder to put down and more of a nuisance to other teams. Even if they do get cleared in one turn, they'll probably force a harder team against themselves. So let's see how that goes. So we're looking at the account update now. So with the Sith Eternal Emperor farming plan that we've been going along on, we made some little bits of progress here. We've been able to get the Range Trooper up to gear 13, which is where I'm going to leave him. The Dark Trooper is still stuck at gear 11, tier 4. So with 4 pieces attached, he's still missing 2 pieces and held up slightly by the caretakers. I think we were able to advance Stormtrooper a few more gear pieces, and he's at gear 11 now, looking down the barrel of gear 12. Mara Jade is also heading that direction, and Thrawn at the point of this video's release is at gear 11 with I think 4 or 5 pieces. Yeah, so the Iden Verso team is just getting a few scraps of gear here and there whenever I can spare it, but there are other priorities, such as Dark Trooper. I think finally needs to be pushed up a few relic pieces before we can actually be happy with where he is. But yeah, we shall see how that goes in the coming weeks. So as it stands at the moment, we have 6 out of the 16 pieces unlocked, 6 out of the 15 pods unlocked for Sith Eternal Emperor. So we're approaching a relative halfway point, I guess. I'd say at like 7.5, I suppose. So pretty happy with the progress so far, and this Imperial Trooper team hopefully starts dealing a bit more damage. I think I'm definitely going to try and prioritize Dark Trooper, maybe even start force forming the caretakers shock prods with more energy refreshes when possible. The drop rate hasn't been too great of late, so we'll see. I'm not too keen to spend too much crystals on it either. If we then look at the second set of teams, I was able to advance Dooku actually through from gear 12 to relic, I think it's at relic 4 at the moment. On this team sheet I also added the Armorer and Watt. I figured since they're ultimately going to be needed to babysit or to amplify Sith Eternal Emperor once he's unlocked and being used later on, I rather start gearing them up at the moment. My guild is still progressing with Darkside GOTBs, so my Watt is only, I think, at about 5 or 6 stars at the moment, still needing 5 stars actually, sorry. So he's still going to need a bit more star power, but that'll be in a few months' time. Hopefully we'll get him up and running, and that should coincide with the time Sith Eternal Emperor is up. So I thought let's just start getting his gear movements going in the meantime, and I put him under the other section since he doesn't really fit into a team and will be paired with Sith Eternal Emperor. We were able to get Maul out of the turquoise gear into the purple gear now. Savage got a little bit more gear, as did Darth Sidious. But Dooku's gear requirements are actually surprisingly easy. Other than, I think it was 2 Chirotech shock rods that he needed. So sorry for Dark Trooper, but he was looking down the barrel of progressing to a relic level, and since we're forming a bit of a separate team around him, with him being the linchpin for that team, I thought, you know what, why not, let's just put a bit of gear in him, give him some relics, and let's just see how he does in the next season, once we can get him up to the required relic tier 6. So that's where we are at the moment. 6 out of the 15 requirements complete, and let's see how the rest of this progresses. So, looking over the account itself as a whole, currently with where our account is sitting at, we have moved our galactic power across to the 4 million point, so going up from 3.8 million to 4 million, a gain of about 110k GP, which is huge. Our relic farm, so currently our current relic target is Count Dooku. We've moved from gear 12 to relic 3, and we're going to try and progress him through to relic 6. I think at the time of this video being made or being put together on YouTube now, he's at around relic 4, but that relic farm is going a little bit slow. Currently we don't have any active gear 13 farms. Our current gear 12 pushes are for Dark Trooper, who's still stuck where he was previously, so I'm going to try and prioritize caretakers to him to get him across the gear 12 point to increase his offense. Thrawn is a gear 11 with 5 pieces attached. Our energy farms are the Armorer, as I mentioned on the previous slide, Cara Dune, IG-11, and the 2 ships are still plugging along. Fortunately, Vulture Droid now has the Iden Verso, adding an incentive. The Zeta for this week went to Count Dooku and the Flawless Riposte to help with protection recovery in using him as a more functional and viable team. We're currently at about 15 out of 20 Omicrons, and I'm really considering giving the next Omicron to Wampa with the Cornered Beast. So far the footage I've seen online of Wampa with the Omicrons being able to solo some of the teams that are giving my nest problems definitely makes it a very attractive option. In terms of the shopping plans that we've had so far, so our guild store currency is still being used for the First Order Special Forces type ship, which is at 83 out of 85 shards towards 6 star. Squad Arena currency is still going for the ship prestige mats, and we're going to try and see if we can unlock the Chimera soon so we can have a better Empire fleet for our KYBER 4 foray. I'll get one, we're still saving for Malak, and every now and then I just use it for a clutch buy just to finish off and save me some time and energy. Get 2 is being used for now for the Malevolence, since our negotiator is at 7 stars. Woohoo! But Malevolence is at 5 stars, 23 shots so far, so a bit more time to go there, and of course short shot for gear 13 items. So that brings us to the end of this vlog entry number 8. Thanks so much everyone for watching, and I hope you guys have found this useful. As always, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and leave any feedback you think about what I could do better with the account, anything else you'd like to see me post about or to discuss with the account reviews. And thanks again for anyone watching and for the support. If you guys are interested, just feel free to check out the Twitch live streams for the Grand Arenas. I'll be streaming pretty much every Grand Arena as I stumble my way through KYBER 4. So check it out in the description below. Thanks a lot. Cheers.